Massacre in Mandera. Al-Shabaab's latest attack moves President Kenyatta into action. We'll get the story from Nairobi. Covering conflicts. Somalia's media gets a lesson in reporting and self-preservation. And how a simple medical procedure can reduce a man's chances of HIV infection. Africa 54 starts right now.
Hello and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. First to Kenya. The Somali militant group Al-Shabaab has claimed responsibility for killing 36 people early Tuesday in the country's northeast. The attack happened at a quarry near the town of Mandera, where witnesses say gunmen struck as workers were sleeping in their tents. An Al-Shabaab statement said its fighters had killed what they called Kenyan crusaders and was punishing Kenya for sending troops to fight in Somalia. The Kenyan troops have been in Somalia since 2011 as part of a multi-nation Africa force that has helped push Al-Shabaab out of Somalia's major cities. The militants have carried out periodic attacks in Kenya, warning the government that more will come unless it withdraws the troops. Last month, Al-Shabaab gunmen killed 28 people in the same region as Tuesday's killings. Well, for more, VOA's Gabe Joslo joins us live now via Skype from Nairobi. Gabe, what has been the reaction from the government towards this latest attack?
Well, we saw some big moves from the government today in response to the latest attack. Two top security officials, were let go from their positions after this major attack occurred just 10 days, from another similar atrocity. So what happened was the Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta announced that he was going to nominate a new cabinet secretary for the interior who would replace Joseph Ole Lenku. And meantime, the police chief, David Kamayo, also resigned, which President Kenyatta accepted. So this is a major change at the top of the Kenyan security structure, and it's something that many activists and critics of the government's handling of past security instances have been asking for a long time.
But at the same time, when the attack happened last week, citizens, especially of that part of the country, said they feared there would be another attack. Now, what are they saying, given that it has actually happened?
Yeah, that's exactly right. There's still a lot of fear that this is not the last attack from Al-Shabaab. In fact, there was a senator from Mandera County who said that since Kenyan forces went into Somalia and have been part of the successful African Union forces that have driven Al-Shabaab out of their major strongholds, there's a fear that more militants could come closer to the border with Kenya and even cross over. The town of Mandera itself is right against the border with Somalia, and it's very porous. It's very easy for people to cross back and forth, so that is still a major concern, and it's not clear that a military effort alone would be enough.
Has there been any talk of actually withdrawing Kenyan troops from Somalia?
Not from the top of the government. President Kenyatta was very firm today that Kenya would maintain and maybe even increase its military presence in Somalia, that Kenya would not flinch, is the words that he used, and that this is a war on terrorism that is not just about protecting Kenya, but about protecting the region from the threat of Al-Shabaab.
Now, with this kind of attacks, how is the mood, how's the sense of security in other parts of the country, especially in Nairobi?
Well, people are just very, very scared. I mean, when something happens in Mandera or Wajir, as it has happened in the past few months, people here in Nairobi become, very tense. There was a lot of talk, and as you may know, some big protests last week demanding more action to make the country safer. Every time one of these attacks strikes one part of Kenya, it's really felt across the country.
Some have said the Kenyan government doesn't seem to have the kind of a structure and perhaps the willpower to really deal with Al-Shabaab. What is its response?
Well, the government is really relying on strengthening its military capabilities, on increasing airstrikes against suspected militant targets in Somalia itself, on partnering with the Somali government more to secure the border. But the fact is, it's a very long and large border with Kenya. It's, as I said, very porous, and so what really needs to be done is, as some representatives, officials from the area have said, is to create a more substantial buffer zone to really make that border something that's safe and secure, and to check the people that are coming across, to try to put an end to the militant activity.
Well, Gabe, thank you very much. Well, viewers, Gabe Josler reporting live via Skype from Nairobi, Kenya. Now, with Al-Shabaab still lingering in Somalia, UN agencies, the Somali government and the Somali Journalists Union are working to address violence against journalists and the problem of censorship. Abdulaziz Bilo has more for VOA from Mogadishu.
This year, at least 3 journalists have been killed in Somalia and 3 more badly wounded. Abdirisaq Ilmi, a local TV journalist, was the latest victim. Unknown gunmen shot him at close range outside his Mogadishu home. He survived but suffered severe wounds. The government says now is the time to address the safety of journalists. Mustafa Duhlo is Somalia's Minister of Information.
As you are all aware, Somalia is moving forward to become a peaceful nation. Therefore, this is the best time to address all the challenges such as impunity, safety of journalists, and understanding the need to develop Somali media, as each country's development depends on how this media are free.
The journalists in Somalia have been meeting with key partners to discuss their security concerns. At this session, representatives from the United Nations, the Somali government and the Somali Journalists Union jointly expressed their concerns over attacks on the media. The UN's Cassandra Nelson pointed out that Somalia is among the top 10 deadliest countries for journalists in the world.
And despite significant progresses that have been made in Somalia, assassinations, imprisonments, harassment still continues, and often without impunity. And that's what we are here to talk about together as a group.
The Journalists Union, Mohammed Ibrahim, outlined his group's concern.
The impunity of, is giving more opportunity for the killers to do more attacks against the journalists. So this conference will mainly focus on the issue of safety and the security of journalists and the current freedom of expression situation.
The journalists also debated a controversial media law that awaits parliamentary approval. For months now, journalists have expressed concern over some parts of the law which they say restrict freedom of the press while not properly addressing their safety. UN officials share these reservations. Jaco Dutoit is with UNESCO's Regional Office for East Africa.
Journalists are extremely important in our society, and without information that they provide us, we will not be able to make informed decisions.
In addition to violence, journalists face the problem of government censorship. The Somali government recently shut down 2 independent radio stations accused of inciting violence among Somalis. Several journalists are also in prisons across the country. In Somaliland, a self-declared independent nation to the north, authorities have increased their control of the media by shutting down leading newspapers and imprisoning editors. Abdulaziz Bilo for VOA News, Mogadishu.
Well, the World Bank says the Ebola epidemic is having a stark economic impact on Liberia, Sierra Leone and Guinea. It projects a drop in economic growth even below estimates published in early November. Well, before the Ebola crisis, all 3 nations had strong economic growth. The economic impact of disease and death has been amplified by workers and shoppers staying home to avoid contagion. The economy is also hurt by reductions in trade, travel, and the loss of foreign experts in mining and other industries. The impact of Ebola is expected to continue being felt as rising expenses for health care and falling tax revenues strain national budgets. Governments are also being forced to move money from infrastructure projects to emergency medical activities. Well, protests are still taking place in some American cities following last week's decision by a grand jury not to indict the white policeman who killed an unarmed black teenager in Ferguson, Missouri. U.S. President Barack Obama late Monday announced steps to improve trust between the police and communities they serve. Zlatsa Hoke has more.
President Obama said he was struck by the stories of discrimination coming from young people who participated in the discussion Monday.
When I hear the young people around this table talk about their experiences, it violates my belief in what America can be.
Mr. Obama said in a country that values equality under the law, it is not acceptable to have so many people of color feel that they're treated unfairly.
When any part of the American family does not feel like it is being treated fairly, that's a problem for all of us. It's not just a problem for some. It's not just a problem for a particular community or a particular demographic. It means that we are not as strong as a country as we can be.
President Obama also acknowledged the difficulties that law enforcement officers face at work, but he said the differences between the police and communities of color are not irreconcilable.
In fact, I'm convinced that if we work hard, that we can make sure that police officers and the communities they serve are partners in battling crime, partners in making sure everybody feels safe, that we can build confidence and we can build trust, but it's not going to happen overnight.
He said in order to advance that goal, law enforcement will establish a list of best practices that must be institutionalized on the federal, state, and local levels around the country. One of the key issues discussed was the military-grade arms used by riot police during the protests in Ferguson.
I will be signing an executive order that specifies how we are going to make sure that that program is accountable, how we're going to make sure that that program is transparent, and how are we going to make sure that we're not building a militarized culture inside our local law enforcement.
The president said he will propose several initiatives for police reform, equipment, and training. A $263 million budget request will include the purchase of 50,000 lapel cameras for police officers. Rights activists said the meeting was important, but that the action should not stop there.
We live in a country that we must support law enforcement, but law enforcement must support justice. The ruling in Ferguson is something that is not a wake-up call for many of us that's been woke a long time. It's a reminder to the nation to live up to the principles. And I think the president gathering all of us and young leaders today was historic, but it should not be an isolated incident.
President Obama said he is deeply invested in following through on this issue because the experience of some young Americans violate his belief in what America can be. Zlatica Hoke, VOA News, Washington.
Well, this week, South Africa marks the first anniversary of the death of Nelson Mandela, with ceremonies that will both mourn and celebrate the first leader of democratic South Africa. President Jacob Zuma is hailing Mandela, who died at age 95 on December 5, 2013, for his policy of reconciliation in the racially divided nation. As part of the remembrances, officials will lay a wreath at Union Buildings, the seat of the presidency, in Pretoria. The nation's deputy president will also officiate at an interfaith service. Mandela's charitable foundation, located in Johannesburg, will put on display some 4,800 condolence books and more than 3,000 condolence cards collected from around the world. Now, we want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook and check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Coming up, in tonight's health, eliminating HIV. South Africa opens up a new front to reduce new infections. Stay with us.
Ebola is not a curse or spiritual infection. It is a deadly disease, a fever spread by contact with the body fluids of infected people. I am Dr. Conde Greaves. Its symptoms start with a fever, fatigue, and muscle pain. Within a few days, vomiting and diarrhea sets in, and victims lose about 4 liters of body fluid each day. Ebola is highly infectious. If you experience any of these symptoms, seek medical help immediately. You must wash your hands regularly. Do not eat or handle bushmeat. Stay away from people suffering from Ebola. And do not handle the bodies of Ebola victims. If you have had contact with someone who has Ebola, you need to have your temperature monitored daily for any change. Early diagnosis and treatment is critical to your survival. Learn the facts about Ebola. Knowledge is life.
Wherever you are, Voice of America is on air, reaching more than 130 million weekly, worldwide, in more than 40 languages. Online, social media, and breaking news from around the world. On the go, dozens of new features on popular platforms with new apps and trending topics. Voice of America, on air, online, on the go.
Welcome back to Africa 54. I'm Vincent McCory. Now, do you know your HIV status? Well, a new test can provide an answer in just seconds. In tonight's Health, we have two reports on combating AIDS, beginning with VOA's Bernard Schatzman in New York.
New York was one of the first major cities in the United States to be hit by the AIDS virus in the 1980s. Since that time, treatment for the disease has been getting progressively better. In this public setting off a busy New York street, a mini laboratory is providing free testing all day for the HIV virus. Its health workers say it is non-intrusive and easy.
So the test is very simple. It comes in this packet. It's pretty straightforward. There's no blood involved.
In New York City, 1 in 5 people who have the HIV virus do not know their status. So that's why the community has set up these mobile laboratories. The test takes seconds. The results are back in about 20 minutes.
So with this top part, you're going to slide it across your gums, back and forth, and then you would do the same thing on the bottom, like if you're brushing your teeth.
This is all part of the Community Healthcare Network program to not only test, but to educate and provide some preventative measures. Despite all the progress, Media Program Manager Diana Diaz says HIV is still a big problem.
HIV is still increasing. Although we've gotten an increase in terms of medications, the availability of care, even insurances, we still have a new number of patients. We have an increase of maybe about 8% every year.
Diaz says 90% of all new HIV cases among women in New York are either African Americans or Latinos. Almost 4,000 New Yorkers will be infected this year, which is good reason, according to the City Health Department, to test. To date, more than 100,000 New Yorkers have died from AIDS-related causes. Bernard Schatzman, VOA News, New York.
Well, now to South Africa, where health officials are promoting circumcision to reduce new HIV infections. Researchers have found that circumcised men are twice less likely to contract the virus. We get more from Emily Eob in Johannesburg.
Each day, dozens of men pass through the door of the circumcision clinic in the south of Johannesburg. But before any surgery, all patients attend a counseling session to be briefed on the protective impact of circumcision. Abel, 17 years old, came with his brother.
Protects from AIDS.
It does to a certain extent. Circumcised men are twice as likely to be infected by HIV than those who are uncircumcised. So clinic's medical staff counsels these men to also use condoms. The protective effect of circumcision was confirmed through clinical trials about 10 years ago, prompting the WHO and local governments to launch massive circumcision program in 14 priority countries in Africa, which represent 50% of all AIDS cases. After counseling, men are offered an HIV test, since UNAIDS estimate more than half the people living with HIV are not aware of their status. Then comes the surgery, which lasts 5 to 7 minutes and is pain-free, says general practitioner Dumisani Mshlambi.
All they're scared of, all they're thinking of is pain. Is there going to be pain inflicted more than anything else? 99.4% we do render pain-free services to a certain extent.
The Bophelo Pele Clinic in Orange Farm was the first circumcision center to open in South Africa in 2007. Awareness campaign seems to be working in this neighborhood, where more than 80% of men are circumcised, compared with less than 20% 7 years ago. Dozens of other centers have since opened across the country. Male nurse Mandizi Mfwaze says social norms have shifted over the years.
It's actually, now if you are not circumcised as a young man, you are most likely will be, some guys will laugh at you. So people come also because of peer pressure, not only because of the HIV and AIDS reasons, but it is beneficial to them at the end of the day.
CHAPS, the Center for HIV and AIDS Prevention Studies, which manage the clinics, continue to study the impact of the circumcision. CEO Dirk Touwjaert says new data suggests circumcision benefit women too.
Lastly, we saw a protective effect for women already. So if you have women in the community that have only had circumcised partners, their risk was reduced already by about 20% from 15 to 25-year-old women.
It is estimated that in South Africa, for every 4 circumcisions done, 1 HIV infection is avoided. Since 2007, more than 1.5 million circumcisions have been performed, and possibly close to 400,000 new infections have been avoided. Emi Diab, for VOA News, Johannesburg.
Well, still to come on Africa 54, loving the new Star Wars trailer? Well, so did this guy, and his reaction has gone viral. The story just ahead. But first, a review of Tuesday's headlines.
أن أفتتح هذه الجلسة.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. How excited were you when you first saw the trailer for the new Star Wars film? As much as this guy?
That was hot! The dark side.
Now, meet Tyrone Magnus. He's a voiceover actor and YouTube personality who's best known for his reaction videos. And he's also obviously a huge Star Wars fan. This video was posted to Reddit with the title, "The best reaction to the new Star Wars teaser that I've seen yet." Now, the post received more than 2,000 app votes by Saturday morning. The video has been viewed over 460,000 times on YouTube and counting. May the force be with you, Tyrone. Well, next up, Swiss food giant Nestle unveils a humanoid robot that will help sell its coffee makers at electronic stores across, where else? Japan. Now, the waist-high robot named Pepper is capable of learning and expressing human emotions and of serving as a companion or guide in a country that faces chronic labor shortages. Nestle initially commissioned 20 robots to the Nescafe coffee makers section to interact with customers. It has said it plans to increase the robot clerks to 1,000 by the end of next year to promote sales of its coffee makers and KitKat chocolate bars. And finally, 2014's Victoria's Secret Angels make their debut. Now, the models were on hand to promote the Victoria's Secret runway show at the company's London flagship store. This is the first time in the show's history, that it will be outside of the U.S. The show itself will be seen in approximately 200 countries and will feature a performance from Taylor Swift. Rumor has it that Kim Kardashian's younger sister, Kendall Jenner, will be working the runway this year. And that is what is trending today. Now, from food to electronics, Kenya is seeing a growing number of international brands set up shop in the country. So what's the draw? How about a fairly young population, a growing middle class, and rising incomes? There are some international brands you just can't avoid wherever you go, but Kenya could soon see a much bigger influx. It's not the companies themselves moving in, it's their franchises. Samuel Njiru runs Nairobi's Cold Stone Creamery.
We went to Arizona, where Cold Stone was founded back in 1988, Arizona Scottsdale, that is, for training on ice cream. We trained on how to produce ice cream.
Kenya is an attractive country for investors. Last year, it saw growth of almost 6%. But it's not the easiest place to do business. In fact, in a recent World Bank report, it came 136th out of 182 countries. Poor infrastructure, a complex legal system and regulation are the main problems. Letting locals run the businesses helps solve that. Dr. Joyce Gikunda has the franchise for Mark Cosmetics.
We sat on the table and we said, we know this market better than you do. You know the products, you know the brand better than we do. But we know the clientele, we know the attitudes, we know the demographics of this country better than we do.
There are benefits too for Kenya. Consumers get more choice and standards often improve. Kiprono Kitoni is from the Chamber of Commerce and Industry.
Foreign brands, a lot of them ascribe to global best practice. These are brands, goods and services that have found a place in the international market. And I think the fact that they have chosen Kenya to position those brands is also a manifestation that we are both ready as a market and willing to really adopt best practice.
That could lead to less corruption, which is often a problem in Africa, and in time, perhaps less poverty. There may be a growing middle class among its 41 million population, but 40% still live in less than $1.25 a day and with no chance of being able to buy an ice cream. Well, and that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show, Africa News Tonight at 1800 UTC. And in the mornings to Daybreak Africa. That's between 0300 and 0600 UTC, Monday to Friday. Thanks a lot for watching. From all of us here in Washington, thank you and have a good night.
Welcome to English in a Minute. Talking about food is a favorite topic in the United States. Here is a popular term.
Junk food.
What is junk food? Is it good for you?
I just ate a bag of potato chips, a couple of candy bars, and 2 sodas.
Are you kidding? That's a lot of junk food. I thought you were on a healthy diet.
I am.
Guess not.
The word junk means something that does not have value. It can be thrown away. Junk food is food that's not good for you. It is not the kind of food you want to eat if you are watching your weight or trying to be healthy. But many Americans love junk food. All those crunchy, sweet, and high-calorie items sell well. And that's English in a Minute.